Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out Rogal Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fist by Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer. Yes guys, this was recommended to me by our Prefect Hobbit, so big thank you to you Hobbit for the recommendation of course. Yeah, Rogal Dorn, does he really need a introduction guys? Let's be honest here. We've been checking him out quite a bit during the Siege of Terra series that we've been checking out recently. Looks like that might be the winner of this week's poll again. Yeah, he's been involved quite a bit, you know, Rogal Dorn, Siege of Terra, hand in hand of course. Best defense is a good offense, you know, by his doctrine of course. You guys heard me say it a lot, you know, I believe the best offense is a good offense, you know, the best defense is also a good offense, you know. Ideally you never have to defend if your offense is good enough, but that's not to take away from what Rogal Dorn does, what his duties are per se. Absolute badass, as are the Imperial Fists and their successor chapters eventually down the line, of course. We're obviously going to leave a like here. We're already got captions on. If you guys enjoy, make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe for more content from me, of course. Leave your recommendations down in the comments below. And without any further delay, guys, I say we get right into this video. Captions are already on. We're already liked up. Quality's 1080p, full screen. Without any further delay, let's get it, guys. Baldermort introduces Wargamers Unification Group. Okay.
Welcome, gentle listener. I will apologize immediately to you, for I have been a liar.
Oh yeah?
A liar of omission. You may have seen me extol the joys of the game in my bat reps and product reviews. You may have heard my passion when narrating the beginnings of the lore. But I have kept you in the dark for your own protection.
Oh yeah?
I have been keeping something from you. And I feel it is now time. For there is a reason that Warhammer 40k is not just liked, or even obsessed over, but loved. Warhammer 40k is truly loved by its fans for very good reason.
Definitely is.
I am about to reveal to you in all its bittersweet glory.
I will say, it seems like a love-hate relationship sometimes. There's definitely a lot more love out there than there is hate, of course, but the hate only comes from, like, let's say the bad decisions of the people in charge of Warhammer, let's say, you know, Games Workshop themselves, you know, the creators of it. Unfortunately, you know, the creators are usually the undoing of it all, you know, and unfortunately, and I feel like that's particularly true in Warhammer's case, you know, a lot of people are not the happiest at Games Workshop, let's say.
A reason I am about to reveal to you in all its bittersweet glory. It is not the toys, as splendid as they are. It is not the painting, as therapeutic as it is. It is not even the socialization and relaxation, which I laud so very much. It is the escapism. It is in its depth. No other fictional universe I know of, not even that of the Star Wars saga, has such depth. It is encapsulated in one terrible moment and one single image, but you must understand it to understand why it is so potent. What I call the longest second. It is contained within the story that I am about to tell you, but the moment I speak of is the defining instant that evokes such passion and loyalty in this world's adherents. It is why I consider the tale among the best and most heart-rending fiction in modern Western literature. It may never gain the acclaim it deserves, and I certainly will not be able to do it justice. But I will try. So, gentle listener, put your hand in mine, metaphorically.
Right, of course.
And let us go to the darkest point in the universe. That which I call the longest second. Let us see why the Warhammer universe is so important to so many, why it stands the test of time. So, let us explore the existing lore of one of the greatest heroes, possibly the most tragic hero of the Warhammer universe, where this moment is contained. I introduce to you, gentle listener, the tale of the Primarch of the 7th Legion of the Legiones Hastatis. To the Praetorian of Terra, welcome to the tale of Rogal Dorn.
I will say I do understand and I do agree with his point there too. Yeah, Warhammer does have a shitload of depth to it for sure. Especially you look at how many books there are in certain series alone, you know. Impossible to say that, like, you know, Warhammer doesn't have depth, Warhammer doesn't have a nuance to it, all that shit, you know. It definitely does. And it's very easy to see why people get so enthralled by the universe itself. It's because there's so much there. There's so much to go off of. And while there is some answers that are up to interpretation, there is a lot of explanations as well, right? Usually, like, misinformation in the Warhammer series comes from unreliable storytellers, whatever have you, right? For the most part, or just, you know, like, I guess misinterpretations by the characters that are actually there, right? And I think that's a really, really cool way to do it, you know, because it means, like, you can change things, but it makes sense to change them in lore because the person who told the story to begin with was never actually telling the truth, or to his knowledge, he wasn't telling the full truth, you know? I think that's a really, really cool way to do it.
Dawn. Now, let us begin our journey. I must give you the briefest of snapshots of history, which I will cover in further detail later.
Right.
Because it has such a colossal, overbearing import to the story I must relate today. Also, do bear in mind that this is merely an introduction to Rogal Dorn.
Of course.
To cover his history would simply not be consumable via this medium without a plethora of sittings. So be aware that I will revisit segments of this history in greater detail in the future, if it is requested. In a time of abject horror, a time when humanity was almost extinguished, a man arose to save us all. This individual was the man later known only as the Emperor of Mankind. For in the future, humanity had developed and bestrode the stars, forming a mighty confederation of planets far and wide. But as with all things, it was not to last. The means by which ships traversed the galaxy was called a warp drive.
Of course.
Transporting into another adjacent universe, known as the Imperium or warp. Ships could travel to far distant stars in fractions of the time it would take them in the real world, the Materium. So the Human Federation colonized the stars, and they developed these technologies. Technologies that would awe the people of today, well, for that matter, those of the later period of the 41st millennium. Humanity believed itself untouchable. Its robotic armies.
We've heard this.
Were with us.
I will say we've obviously heard this build up quite a bit before. The events leading up to the collapse of humanity and how exactly it happened. Right. I'm not going to pause too much throughout this. You know, we've heard this story before. Let's say
untouchable. Its robotic armies, the men of iron, were without number.
Men of iron, of course.
So advanced, none, not even the ancient race called the Eldorei.
You check some more out about them sometime.
Them without huge cost. Humanity was ascendant and felt its time had come. It felt invulnerable. But thus do all falls begin, with hubris, with arrogance. A string of things happened over a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things. But do not worry, as I shall cover them all in more detail in my own inimitable style at another juncture. But let us list them now, so we have context. The men of iron, the very armies of humanity turned on their masters. Hardly novel, but the way in which this impacts is phenomenal and very distinct. But we shall get into the nuances another time.
Of course.
Just know that much of humanity died in that ages-long struggle, which they barely won, with the assistance of others, against their own automated army. When humanity was on its knees, still recovering from the holocaust that was the cybernetic revolt, Further disasters then struck. The warp, which facilitated fast and light travel, became almost impossible. Huge warp storms closed off much of the galaxy and made travel effectively impossible. As the Confederation of Planets of the Humans had always relied so heavily on trade and cooperation, the effects were immediate and catastrophic.
Oh yeah.
Entire worlds.
As we know, yeah. The second you don't have faster than light travel or communication in the age of I guess what would you call it? The age of exploration of space, right? The age of colonization of space, in a sense, right? Second you stop being able to communicate or send supplies or do any of that, man, a lot of these planets are not self-reliant. You know, they require resources from the outside to make them sustainable, especially if you're like landing on death worlds, would eventually become known as death worlds, or cold planets, barren planets, moons, whatever have you. A lot of these asteroid complexes, a lot of the reason I think we see a lot of like decayed structures in 40k, a lot of these like decayed hulks and shit everywhere, it's obviously because, you know, like the second, you know, you can't get a supply ship in, you're dead, you're going to starve to death, your oxygen's going to run out, you're going to run out of fuel, whatever have you. If you can't process everything you need on your planet or on your astral body, wherever you were stationed at the time, you're just fucked, plain and simple.
The effects were immediate and
very depressing.
Catastrophic. Entire worlds would previously be cities or industrialized and relied entirely on the produce of their neighbors. These planets' populations swiftly went into famine and then into starvation. Rioting occurred across the galaxy, and the human civilization was swept away. Planets that relied on the goods and equipment produced by their neighbors were similarly unable to survive, or regressed into feudal worlds.
That would arguably be like 90% of them, straight up.
All that one could hope for justice and peace. It was a time of strong men. On top of this, humanity started to realize its potentials again, and psychers, those able to tap into the energies of the warp to create wonders or defy the rules of the galaxy, started emerging with increased regularity and with increased ability to harness the warp.
Right.
The sad truth is that planets and societies that embraced this Nova Homus, the new man, the Psyker, were eventually to regret their openness. For as the Psykers emerged, their powers to tap into the warp started to attract evils that had never yet been encountered by humanity in the real world, the Materium. Psykers would succumb to the dark whispers of the denizens of the warp and be possessed. Denizens that the Imperium now called demons, and entire sectors would fall to their predations. A demon is almost impossible to defeat without a fully trained and astonishingly experienced and powerful psyker on one side, or the kind of technology and weaponry that was fast.
That does not exist anymore. Pure and simple.
Human civilization. It was not to.
Let me rephrase that. It does exist, but exceedingly rare as time goes on.
Aggression of huge swathes of human civilization. It was not to be. As there were none to train these nascent psykers, none to protect them. The carnage and enslavement of these beings went unchecked for the most part, and again, the population of humanity shrunk even more. Their freedom torn from them, and their lives reduced to that of cattle, chattel, or fodder.
Oh man.
For the whims of their immortal and
in 40k, impossible. They would never.
And Xenos alike. As humanity weakened, those races with which they had allied with to match the threat of the men of iron, their allies, all turned on them. Perhaps this is the propaganda of the Emperor, but none live who can gainsay or refute his reading of a past that he alone survived. For the Emperor...
Is that true? That's definitely not true. There's definitely perpetuals and shit like that would have been alive and potentially might have seen what happened. I don't actually know if that's true, perhaps. I don't know if the Emperor kept any perpetuals around him. I know he definitely mingled with a few at certain points, but I don't know if there would have been any like close enough to him to actually witness any of that go down. Good point there.
His reading of a past that he alone survived. For the Emperor is immortal. and has lived for a very long time. Thus did humanity get assailed and enslaved or destroyed, also by their erstwhile allies. A crime, a pain, that the Emperor has never forgotten, and his sons have been reminded of ere
He's
ever
very
they
fucking
embarked
salty,
on the
let me tell you.
campaigns of the Great Crusade. This period is named the Age of Strife, by others, Old Night, and it deeply affected the entire subconscious of the human race, scarred it beyond recognition. For thousands of years, humanity was beaten, killed, enslaved, and corralled. We were almost stricken from history, and would have eventually been so, if it were not for the coming of the Emperor of Mankind. On the birth planet of humanity, once called Earth, now called Terra, Terra, the Emperor, who had watched all the ages of mankind, arose. He threw off his lifelong rules and fetters that prevented him from ever revealing himself. Before, he had no
except to a
name,
certain priest, of course.
now, this
I guess that was
eternal
after, to be
human,
fair.
the most powerful of all our kind, reckoned that there was simply no alternative. Terra itself had become a wasteland of feuding techno-barbarian states with the technology to create biological and mechanical terrors.
Definitely gives credence, man. I always keep thinking back to this, and I always keep thinking, like, damn, the Emperor definitely had to have planned his rise. You know, he didn't appear earlier on because I feel like humanity would have been far too hard for him to control at that point, right? But man, when humanity's been beaten down, when there's our grip on the stars has been completely fucking shattered, and humanity on our capital planet is degraded to warring factional states, tribes, I guess you could literally call them, not even states at this point, they're tribes, literally techno-barbarian tribes. This is where he's going to come and rise, and then he is going to plant himself at the head. You see this happen with a lot of cults of personalities. He definitely waited until opportunity was ripe enough for him to take control only. You know what I mean? I definitely don't think he had humanity's interests at the heart of his concerns. You know, the more I learn about the Emperor, the more I think, damn, dude, maybe he's just in it for himself. It's hard to say.
Barbarian states with the technology to create biological and mechanical terrors. It was infested with evil psychos and immoral wizards, entire states that had fallen to control by Xenos, the Imperium's term for aliens. All the populace of Terra could do was look on in horror as their lives were effectively hell. There was nothing but
could always be worse.
Evil,
no, couldn't.
pain and tyranny.
In this case, it actually could.
Of the Emperor. Within a scant few hundred years, he had created his Custodian Guard and his Thunder Warriors, the precursors to his Space Marines, and took the fight out to the lands around him. He began the Wars of Unification. We will skip to the end of this period, as I will update you as time goes on, with the lore of that period as I can. But needless to say, the Emperor crushed all before him, and unified the humans of Earth, of Terra, and destroyed any and all outside influences that had helped to bring humanity low. But this was just the beginning. The Emperor prepared a great crusade, a great army to go forth from Terra, and with but one goal alone, the saving of humanity. With his genetically engineered warriors, the Adeptus Astartes, his Space Marines, he prepared to take back the galaxy in the name of peace and justice. As the Sol system fell to his designs, the technological armies of Mars were added to his forces, for Mars had survived semi-intact the Age of Strife. Although a shadow of the power of the human confederation, the tech priests of Mars still commanded great power and had fleets of warships and terrifying forces of Titans, colossal vehicles of war. With Mars on his side and his genetically engineered armies growing apace, the Emperor took off into the galaxy on a twofold mission. The first, as stated, to bring freedom, wisdom, and safety to the beleaguered humans spread across the stars. The second mission was, while moving ever onwards and outwards, to find the sons he had built. For there are 20 legions of superhuman warriors.
20 Asians of superhuman... Whoa.
But
holy
each
shit.
was different due to their template being a different Primarch. The Primarchs, which I will cover in more detail soon, were 20 demigods. The 20 sons of the Emperor that he genetically designed, forged and prepared to lead his armies in his great crusade. They were made from his very own genetic stock, and in his image.
His seed, if you will.
A moment before their birth. Each was taken in their capsules and spread amongst the stars by the powers of chaos. The gods of chaos who hate the Emperor of mankind, naming him the Anathema, seemed terrified of the power the Emperor would have if he had his sons with him. But they were not able to destroy the Primarchs for some reason. So they found a chink in his armors, a hole in his wards, in the Emperor's palace under the Himalayan mountains, and whisked away his sons and deposited them on worlds across the galaxy. Thus, as the crusade moved outward, it would, one by one, find the Primarchs, the very sons of the Emperor. And mighty sons they were.
Oh, yes.
Dwarfed.
Some mightier than others, I will say. Some a lot bitchier than others, too, let's say. Not going to name any names, of course, but let's keep going.
The Emperor. And mighty sons.
One thing I will say that, I don't really mind, because, like, Baldermort, great voice actor. I really, really love his voice, can't complain about that at all. One thing, I do find kind of weird. We are like 15, going on 20 minutes, I guess, in 5 minutes or so here of this video. We're almost halfway through it, I guess. And Rogal Dorn has only been name dropped in the first minute. You know what I mean? So let's keep going. There's a lot of background context, a lot of which we already know going on here. Not that I mind it, just a lot of what we've heard already. We haven't heard a lot of Rogal Dorn yet, so let's hopefully get to that.
The Primarchs, the very sons of the Emperor, and mighty sons they were. Each dwarfed a Space Marine as much as a Space Marine would a normal human, but not just in size, but also in intellect, subtlety, skill, reflexes, wisdom, and power. Truly the Primarchs were titans of old and heroes the like that would put Perseus, Achilles, or even mighty Heracles to shame. And so it was that the capsule that contained the infant Rogal Dorn landed on a planet called Inwit, an ice.
So we got about 16 minutes in of build-up context before we got to Rogal Dorn himself there. All right. That's not bad. Let's keep going.
World, and a hard place for humanity to even survive on. Locked in its orbit around the sun, one side of the world was shrouded in darkness, the other in light, but neither prosperous or easy. Inwit's sun was old and gave off little heat or light, so the planet was more akin to a ball of ice than what we would consider a planet for human habitation. The populace of Inwit were hardy and stern.
Inuit.
Had no choice,
Holy shit.
as weakness was death. A harsh civilization that bred stoic and rugged determination as a matter of course. To quote, conflict against the roaming clans was common, and young warriors learned how to defend against their clan's enemies as early as they learned how to endure the death touch of Inwit's merciless chill. They were incredibly quick learners and had an innate
Kinda goes hard, not gonna lie.
object's functional value, and most importantly, they have the strength and intelligence to conquer those who possess knowledge they do not. Long ago, for the coming of the Emperor was even a dream on night-shrouded terror, the people of Inwit began to create their own realm in the stars. On every world they took, they assimilated, realigned, and reinforced. With each conquest, their culture and learning grew, but Inuit itself remained unchanged, even as it became the center of a stellar empire. The ice hives and clan disputes remained.
That's one thing I find really, really cool about Dorn's I guess, founding, right, is the fact that is the fact that his I guess his starter planet, right, was really more of like a starter solar empire, I guess, in a sense, right? Like they really were like a multi-planetary governorship at that time, right? A lot of Primarchs got like shafted, you know, even conquering one planet was a lot for them. Like, not to, you know, say, oh my god, it's a lot for Primarch. There's different challenges depending upon what the Primarch was, what the planet was, of course. But you know, this planet here, Inuit, it did very, very, very good for itself, all things considered. Took the Age of Strife in strides and definitely came back from it for sure. The planet itself seems kind of trash, very, very cold. You know, not very hospitable. But then they went out there and they got some. I mean, they conquered other planets. I guess they added to their empire. So, you know, they definitely have the means to transport supplies between planets and shit like that. Doing very, very well for themselves. Awesome to see.
Stellar Empire. The ice hives and clan disputes remained, and while their world birthed starships and ringed its orbits with weapons stations, its rulers kept to the old ways, the ways that had created their strength. The warlords and matriarchs who commanded armies amongst the stars, still living lives little easier than their vassals. It was as part of this burgeoning empire that Rogal Dorn grew to manhood, and then to rule its domains as emperor. Much of his early years remain unknown, or at least little talked about. It is, however, certain that in the cold and darkness of Inuit, a boy named Rogal by his adoptive kin rose to lead the House of Dorn, also known as the Ice Caste, and then to the rule of the Inuit cluster. The patriarch of the clan that raised Dorn became an adoptive grandfather to him, and taught him much of tactics, strategy, and diplomacy. Even after he discovered he was not blood-related to his grandfather, Dorn held...
What gave that one away?
He kept a fur-edged robe that had belonged to the man, and slept with it on his bed every night. His qualities married perfectly with those of Inuit, and he pushed their empire...
Is that the safety blanket that you guys keep fucking referencing? The fact that he has a fucking safety blanket or whatever the fuck? And it's just like his mentor's like cloak? You guys are assholes, man. What the fuck?
His qualities married perfectly with those of Inuit, and he pushed their empire further than any other. Rogal led and trained his armies and fashioned spacecraft the like of which had not been seen before. Rogal then discovered a piece of luck. On his voyage of discovery, he came across a relic of the past.
Oh, right.
A
phalanx?
Weapon. For in the Inuit system there was a vessel from the dark age of technology. A battleship of vast size which Dorn
That's no battleship, dude. That's
phalanx.
A fucking space station.
With this as his new capital ship and flag, he moved out and continued the work of his forebears of Inuit. He expanded the empire across the neighboring systems at a frightening pace. The hardy people of Inuit following wherever he led. Rogal's fleets then made contact with the outmost pathfinders and rogue traders at the vanguard of the Great Crusade. He was the 7th of the 20 Primarchs to be discovered by his father, the Emperor of Mankind. The meeting was a joyous one, for Rogal recognized the greatness in the Emperor and his connection with him the moment they met.
I was going to say, too, very, very lucky for those Pathfinders, too. Can you imagine being out there on the Great Crusade? You're expecting Xenos threats. You're expecting fucking horrors of the warp, you know? You don't really know what's going on. And then you see alien, quote-unquote, ships appear, and it's just actually humans on board. What a best case scenario, you know? And hell, you guys even speak the same language still, and one of your Primarchs is with them. That's best case scenario, man. Like, that's a good day to be a Pathfinder, you know? The best day to be a Pathfinder for sure. Holy shit. I imagine there's not very many good days for this forward scouts in that regard.
As the greatness in the Emperor and his connection with him the moment they met. For the Emperor, the blessing and joy was magnified by the discovery of not only a son, but a thriving, powerful military culture as well.
Well, that too, I guess.
Rogal Dorn offered the mighty ship, the Phalanx, to his father, the Emperor. So loyal was he, so swiftly. But the Emperor gave it back to him to command and bade him to take command of the Hastatis, the Space Marines, that had been made out of Rogal's own genetic stock. Effectively, Rogal's long-lost sons. Dorn accepted, but he had conditions. Dorn did not speak a single word to his legion when he first met them. He is quiet and brooding, a demigod watching them while they tried to please him. He insisted he watched them in combat, and watched them he did. When the battle was over, he finally broke his silence. Rogal Dorn informed them that they were warriors, but they had much to learn.
You're all ass.
So, in his inimitable way,
Oh my god.
forged his connection with his legion, the only way that could ever have happened. By example. Dorn trained his men, and his leadership and guidance complemented their existing skills and honed them to a razor's edge.
Oh, definitely.
The 7th Legion had merged with their Primarch more seamlessly than ever before, and became a thing of dread and wonder.
I will say, yeah, Rogal Dorn, he just had that grace with his legion. His boys loved him, and after he trained them, he loved his legion, you know? Yeah, I feel like the Imperial Fists were nothing but loyal to Dorn, and even like the successor chapters after him, you know, definitely remember their heritage, and they are adamantly loyal to him. I think still to this day, even the chapters from the Imperial Fist, you know,
seamlessly than ever before, and became a thing of dread and wonder. For the reason why the sons were so like their father, the Imperial Fists of the 7th Legion, I will leave to their own video, but it was a match made in heaven. It was perfection. From there, the days of the Crusade began for Rogal Dorn and his newly forged legion, the 7th, the Imperial Fists. The Crusade was a constant struggle, a constant war, but one Rogal was more than equipped for in every way. He started fighting alongside the Emperor, as all of the Primarchs did, bar only one. When he had been moulded, and the Emperor had decided it was time, Rogal was seconded to the forces of his oldest brother. I say oldest, as in he was the first found by the Emperor, the longest serving at his side.
Oldest, quote-unquote. They're all the same age, I guess.
Emperor. He was Horus Lupercal, the hammer of the Emperor, and later, his war master. Rogal finally serving alongside not only an equal for first time in his life, but one he considered worthy of his respect, and perhaps a little adoration. For to Rogal, Horus Lupercal was everything a Primarch and statesman, warrior and leader should be. Rogal and Horus.
That's gonna change pretty rapidly. Oh my god.
And firm ones.
Aww.
Once Horus himself stated that his legion, the Lunar Wolves, later to be called the Sons of Horus after Alinor, were the finest in assault, and that if you met the Imperial Fists in war, that it would be an unending stalemate. The irresistible force versus the immovable object. So high in Horus's opinion was his loyal and redoubtable brother Rogal. They fought side by side as brothers on many campaigns. They thought they would never be anything but the closest of friends. But Rogal was most often in the theatres of war led directly by the Emperor, and became known to be like a shadow to the master of mankind. Rogal also made bonds with other Primarchs over many campaigns thereafter, but he was not charismatic or outgoing, and could be known as blunt, so did not always fit in or act in a way to elicit true friendship. The other Primarch he shared a special bond with was, of course, the one Primarch that nearly all of the brothers not only respected but loved.
Sanguinius, of course.
Sanguinius,
yeah.
The Primarch of the Blood Angels. In Sanguinius he found...
There's only a few people that didn't get along with Sanguinius. I feel like pretty much every Primarch, aside from a couple fucking weirdos, got along with Sanguinius to a very, very good degree. I feel like everyone kind of had respect for him, and if not respect, jealousy, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, definitely just embodied what humanity ideally should want to strive for.
The Primarch of the Blood Angels. In Sanguinius he found the traits that most exemplified the goal of the Crusade and the best in humanity, despite Sanguinius's obvious mutation, the wings that grew out of his back. Rogal and Sanguinius's relation was only to grow into one of true camaraderie and respect. In the dark times that followed, it was always his brother Sanguinius in which he trusted. In the war to end all wars, it was his brother the Angel that strode forth when he could not, despite Rogal wishing with all his heart that he could go instead and save the Angel, just in case. It was also his brother Sanguinius alone who shared in the burden of the defense of the palace. But we get ahead of ourselves. Sanguinius, Rogal, and Horus formed a special friendship that few understood. They had something in common that only one other shared. But for that, we must wait for the moment. In the Crusade, the forces of the Imperium pushed forever out and out, further and further. None could stop them. None could gainsay their power, their purpose, their path. And in the Crusade, all of the worst horrors of Old Night, the period of humanity's weakness and need, were highlighted in graphic display. The Xenos tyrants they fought, crushing humans under their feet. The mad sorcerers and psychers who dominated all life for systems around. The degradation of humanity was finally over whenever the Crusade arrived. The Crusade, as far as Rogal was concerned, brought emancipation, safety, and hope to all of the lost tribes of humanity.
Well, technically they all did, right?
Punished their gaulers, their abusers, and their foes.
Could very much argue Kurz did the same thing, right?
Moved forward in lightning, swift raids, and brought planets into Imperial compliance fast, but moved on as quickly. It was not the way of the Imperial fists. Where Horus might have won the Imperium, it is said that Rogal Dorn built it. Wherever a war had been fought, Rogal set up defenses and hard points, castles and keeps, so that no insurrection would rise, but also so those worlds he conquered were defensible, and their peoples left with pride. He built each world up and did not move on until he had improved the conditions of all those who lived there, as his brother Horus had taught him, and his father, the Emperor, had instructed him.
Which is crazy.
Believed. Where others fought for the battle.
Imagine actually improving the people's lives that you conquer, dude. I couldn't, you know what I mean? Holy shit, that's what a radical fucking thing to do in 40k, you know? You're not just gonna kill them into compliance or threaten them into compliance. Oh my god. Craziness.
Rogal believed. Where others fought for the battle, or for glory, or for accolades and honors, Rogal fought because he believed. He believed in his brothers. He believed in his father. But most important of all, he believed in the dream. The bright and beaming dream of a humanity free, safe, and happy, where they need not fear the skies or the dark or privation or ignorance. Rogal fought for a better tomorrow for his entire race, and he built that better tomorrow with every castle, keep, and border he constructed. Rogal believed in the dream of the Imperium of Man. The Crusade came to a head finally with two great campaigns. One I cannot mention here, but the other was the campaign at Ulanor. At Ulanor, the greatest collection of greenskins ever witnessed occurred, and the forces of the Imperium of Man rose to the occasion. It was the Emperor and Horus Lupercal who met this threat head-on. Others were involved, but it was these two titans of war that met the leadership of the Ulanor orcs at the heaviest of the fighting. On the day the great orc war boss finally was brought to Brook, the Emperor himself was saved by Horus, who beheaded the greenskin warlord, and the battle and the war was over. In recompense for this, by the mountain of accolades and proofs of loyalty, fidelity, and ability, did the Emperor elevate Horus Lupercal to the exalted state of War Master.
Of course.
The Emperor set him above his brothers to lead them as he had done beforehand. And with that, the Emperor then left the Crusade to return home to Terra to deal with other issues.
Right.
It was one of the greatest days in the life of Rogal, for he could genuinely admired his big brother and supported him, and, despite never showing it, as it was not his way, he was so happy for Horus. He thought no other would have made sense. And Horus...
Very cool to see just how loyal he is to Horus there. The fact that he actually supported that decision fully. And even though he's Dorn, he can't really show it himself. He does actually genuinely care that Horus got it. He's happy for him. He's proud for him. Cool to see. Very cool to see that.
He thought no other would have made sense. And Horus repaid that trust and augmented it by secreting himself for a time and
secreting himself?
To help him
Whoa.
reinvent himself, to define and agree the identity and duties of a war master, and to set a bar that Horus must always hold himself to. Horus came to Rogal as one of his closest friends, but also as one of the most accomplished and powerful of all of the Primarchs in the arts of war. Also, to some extent, he came in statescraft, and how to manage his other brothers, for he had not forgotten that Rogal Dorn had once, before his finding by the Emperor, been monarch of an empire of warriors. The administrative approach of Gulliman would not have suited the situation, much as he is lauded for his ability, as it was a congregation of warriors of legend that Horus would have to ride, have to bend to his will, his direction. It could not be done by diktat. After a time, the Emperor recalled Dorn to Terra, to be his Praetorian. The Emperor of Mankind had his body and palace guards in the Custodians, the 10,000. But yet he called back Rogal to be with him, to protect Terra and the Sol system, and to improve the defenses of the Imperial Palace, much as they thought they would not be needed. Many were aggrieved at this singular honour. Perturabo of the Iron Warriors in particular railed against this favoritism shown to Rogal, but Rogal did not care. Rogal Dorn knew that he was the best man to be at his father's side.
Literally, if your goal is to, like, defend a planet... Excuse me, if your goal is to defend a planet... Yeah, why wouldn't you send Rogal? Why would they be salty about that? I guess because it wasn't them, right? And, you know, that's Perturabo, too. Perturabo is kind of a fucking, you know... You can definitely like Perturabo and the Iron Warriors. I appreciate them myself. But to call him anything other than salty at times is, you know, would be incorrect. Like he's a very salty guy for sure. He definitely lets things get under his skin all the time.
Rogal Dorn knew that he was the best man to be at his father's side. I have a theory as to another reason that Rogal might have been at the Emperor's side. But again, we must wait for that dreaded moment. And it was at this point that the horror began in earnest. And nothing Rogal had seen before this prepared him for what was to come. Nothing could. Whilst he was leading a small contingent of his hand-picked guard on his way to Terra to take up his position as Praetorian, Rogal found a lost ship hailing for assistance. It was the Eisenstein.
Oh no.
Aboard were Death Guard who demanded to speak with him immediately. In that fateful moment, that most charged of encounters, Rogal Dorn found out the terrible truth. The Death Guard warrior, Captain Nathaniel Garrow, was the harbinger of doom to Rogal, as he informed the Primarch that his brother, Horus Lupercal, had turned traitor and had recruited others, and they were now in open rebellion against their father. For this, Garrow nearly lost his life, as Rogal was so staggered and enraged by this infamy that he doubted Garrow so much he nearly killed him. Even though enough evidence came forward to prove the word of Garrow and confirm that the worst nightmare had started. The War Master, Horus, had turned his back on the Imperium and the Emperor, and was preparing to make war on all those who remained loyal to the throne. Poor Rogal. One cannot imagine the crushing, heart-rending desolation he must have felt at this news. Why he could not accept it immediately. For one of his brothers turning against the Emperor was one thing. Perhaps Angron, or humiliated Lorgar, or even the insane Conrad. But for his oldest brother, His big brother, the one he admired the most, the one he had vested the most hope in, to have fallen. In that moment it shook Rogal Dorn to the core. Out of nowhere, the hope, the dream of the Imperium was wounded, as it had never been before for Rogal. For one of his brothers to turn would have elicited rage, not confusion. How Rogal must have hurt then, to have the greatest and closest Primarch to the Emperor, his war master, a most trusted son, to turn on him was beyond belief. For Horus Lupercal had turned his back not only on his sire, not only on his loyal brothers, but on the dream of the Imperium. Also, this would have thrown Rogal into such confusion, for if Horus, the brightest light, and the Primarch who seemed so ardently to believe in the hope of the Crusade, for Horus to call it a lie was almost too much to bear. Rogal must have wanted to take flight to confront his brother immediately, not to fight him, but to implore him to return to the light. But no, Dorn, the warrior inside the soul of this Primarch, must have known. As soon as he heard that 3 of his brothers had fallen into the darkness surrounding Horus, he knew that Horus was not alone, and that the others would buoy him up and keep him on the course he was on. The likes of Angron or Mortarion were understandable. But Fulgrim, shock upon shock, horror upon nightmare, grief piled on grief. With such surrounding him, Rogal knew that Horus would not be able to be taken from his path, would never be able to bend the knee and beg for clemency.
Right.
He needed to be adored, so did Horus. So the die was cast, and Dorn knew it would not wash off. Dorn sent his fleet to the Istvan system where the treachery was occurring, and took himself and his elite to Terra to inform his father, the Emperor. Horus Lupercal had turned to evil. He had been seduced by the dark powers of corruption, the dark gods of chaos. More than this, he had turned other brothers with him. The visitors from the Einsenstein reported that Horus had turned Angron of the World Eaters, Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, and Mortarion of the Death Guard. 4 full legions were in revolt, led by the most evil general of them all. Rogal returned to Terra, and his father, the Emperor, issued a full 7 legions and their Primarchs to destroy the rebellion. As the arch-traitors mounted their defense and raised their banner on Istvan V, the retribution force of the Emperor prepared to land. 3 legions were to make landfall first and assault the strong points of the traitors, to then be supported by the other 4. The Salamanders, Iron Hands and Raven Guard landed on Istvan and began their furious attack on the positions of Horus and his treacherous brothers. What happened next is too complex and too important to cover here, but in very brief, the 3 were tricked. They were betrayed. For the other 4 legions that landed behind them, the Word-Bearers, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords, had already gone over to the ruinous powers. They landed and set up fortifications, then joined with Horus's forces and simply blasted the 3 loyalist legions to smithereens. And when they were done with that, they drew out their chainswords and engaged in close combat. The butchery was great. The 3 loyalist legions, the Salamanders, Raven Guard and Iron Hands, were taken by surprise, betrayed and nearly exterminated that day. But worst of all, brother actually slew brother. Although Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, and Vulcan Primarch of the Salamanders, managed to escape that terrible trap. Ferrus Manus, the Primarch of the Iron Hands, was slain, his head cut off his shoulders by his erstwhile best friend and closest confidant in all of the Primarchs, no less than his brother, Fulgrim. What occurred to the Imperial Fist near Istvan will be covered in their own video, but after a short period Rogal issued their recall to the Sol system to assist in its defense.
That makes sense.
Despite having the upper hand against a more numerous opponent, and were winning, did as instructed, and, taking casualties, they withdrew from combat and made their way to Terra as instructed. For the Imperial Fists were ever obedient to their lord, no matter the situation. The next few years were a living hell for Rogal Dorn. He was given command of the remainder of the Loyalist armies as the new War Master of the Emperor, outnumbered and constantly outmaneuvered by his brother, Horus Lupercal. The war always seemed to go against Rogal.
I will say, what an annoying time to become War Master, dude, after everything has already gone to shit, and you have to fight off a rebellion, bro. No. Not the time I would want to be elected War Master. Doesn't seem like a very great time to be in that position, that's for sure. Goddamn.
Horus Lupercal.
And then you fail, then what? It's your fault? Nah. Fuck that.
He fought like a tiger, organized like a whirlwind, and was as tactically astute as any who could have filled his role. Better, perhaps, even than his opposite number, if their roles were reversed. But the inevitable occurred, and the Loyalists were pushed back again and again. Nor would all of his brothers obey his commands, nor follow his lead, despite the stakes involved. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wars, went off on his own rampage, nearly slaying the traitor War Master, but he did not finish the job when he had the chance. Then he and his legion and fleet were forced into consecutive battles, all designed for one thing Rogal feared most: the prevention of the Valka Fenrika, the Space Wolves, from being able to return to defend the Palace of Terror. Rogal was practically alone, his father fighting in the Webway, his closest brothers defeated or in far-flung battle and unable to answer his klaxon call to the throne world. He only had Jagatai, a brother that few knew, fewer still liked or trusted, despite him doing nothing to deserve the reaction. Rogal was, to all intents and purposes, so very, very alone. At this point I will apologize again to you, my gentle listeners, for I cannot bring myself to rush this subject, the very soul of Warhammer 40k. I had believed I would be able to condense this tale into but one video, but I find the subject matter, the work, is too great. I will not sacrifice the journey to the destination, for it would diminish the impact and import of the whole. For this reason I will ask your indulgence and beg for your forgiveness, for the content is too large. I must end this installment here. Also for the reason that the style and pace of the next segment will be so different that it makes logical sense. As the best storytellers all know, leave the best, or the worst, until last. I hope you will continue with me on this path to the darkest moment, the longest second, for it will be available soon.
Siege of Terra, the longest second will be with you soon. Not too bad. I think that is the end there. Seems like it. Okay, guys. Wow, that was Rogal Dorn's Primarch of the Imperial Fist, Baldermort's Guide to Warhammer. I will say, definitely don't mind the extra context in there for sure. But you know, when I see Rogal Dorn Primarch of the Imperial Fist, you know, I read that and I think I'm gonna get a video of just Rogal Dorn and the Imperial Fist, you know. And I will say about 20 to 25 minutes of that was not Imperial Fist related to a degree, like, you know what I'm saying? Not that I really have a problem with that per se, but there was a lot of context, I guess, that we already kind of had in that. A lot of stuff we already kind of knew in that. There wasn't really a whole lot of like new, I guess, groundbreaking information that we hadn't otherwise seen before. So I mean, it was a decent video. I really like his narration style for sure. A little bit slower of a cadence, but that's not a bad thing at all. Definitely like his voice. I could definitely see like going to sleep to his voice or something like that for sure. Yeah, I thought that was a great video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe for more content from me. Of course, leave your recommendations down in the comments below. A big thank you to all of our members, all of our Hastati, your Principe, Dagenhart, of course, our Prefects, Fear, and Hobbit. A big thank you to you, Hobbit, for recommending this video, as always. And yeah, guys, without any further delay, this has been Centurion, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.